In 1977, a 20-year-old woman in Eugene, USA, was invited to a friend's birthday party and agreed to attend. Unfortunately, it was the last time she ever saw the sun, as she was abducted and held captive for many years. In 1984, a hotel worker received some devastating news and broke down in tears. This story is one of the most horrifying and frightening cases in FBI history. The thought of what the victim went through is enough to cause anxiety, and with each passing moment, the reader wishes for her survival. Who was the victim? Who was the hotel worker? What happened in those years? Let's start from the beginning. In 1973, Cameron Hooker, a recent high school graduate, was working in a wood factory at age 19 when he met his dream girl, 15-year-old Janice. Janice grew up in a family with strict religious beliefs and was not allowed to socialize with anyone outside of her limited circle of friends. When her family met Cameron, they were taken with him and impressed by his hard work and appearance at just 19 years old. They agreed to let Janice get to know him better. Janice opened up to Cameron about her abusive family and how it had impacted her self-esteem. He showed her kindness and affection, always bringing her flowers and gifts, which was a stark contrast to her family's neglect. Cameron asked for her to join him in his hobbies in exchange for his ongoing care, which Janice accepted without hesitation. After a few years of dating, Cameron proposed, and her parents immediately gave their blessing. They married and had a baby girl 2 years later. Cameron worked late hours every day, bringing home groceries and other essentials. On May 19, 1977, while running errands with his wife, they came across a young girl, Colleen Stan, who asked for a ride. Colleen thought to herself that they were good people based on Cameron's appearance and the fact that he was with his wife and baby daughter. Unbeknownst to anyone, this encounter would lead to a horrific outcome. But first, let's learn more about Colleen. She grew up in a loving family with her parents and 2 sisters, but after her parents separated, she married young, but the marriage didn't last. Seeking a fresh start, she relocated to Eugene with friends, 400 miles from California. On May 19th, Colleen received an invitation from a friend to attend her birthday party in California. Despite her apologies and promise to make amends later, Colleen was secretly planning to surprise her by showing up unannounced. In the morning, she got ready and set out to her friend's house. Being cautious, Colleen only agreed to ride with those whom she deemed trustworthy after making eye contact and evaluating their character. She declined rides from 2 other cars before encountering Cameron and Janice, whom she felt safe with, and asked for a ride. From that day on, Colleen was never seen again. Her friends initially assumed she had decided to spend the night at a friend's or continue the celebration, but as phones were not yet widespread, there was no quick way to contact her. A few days passed, and Colleen's friends didn't hear from her, so they reached out to her father, who promptly notified the police. The friend was interviewed, but she claimed to have not seen Colleen. The search for Colleen began. What happened to her that day is a chilling and disturbing story. After joining the couple, they stopped at a gas station, and Colleen went to the bathroom. She recalls Cameron's eerie gaze, and her intuition, or gut feeling, told her to run away. But she brushed it off, thinking the couple was a harmless family with a baby. However, it's important to listen to these inner warnings. When Colleen returned to the car, she was surprised to find a wooden box that wasn't there before. A few days after Colleen went missing, her friends called her father to report her disappearance. The police were informed and began their search for Colleen. What happened to her that day is beyond belief. After joining Cameron and Janice on their ride, they stopped at a gas station. Colleen had a strange feeling about Cameron's stares and felt like she should run away, but she ignored her inner voice and got back into the car. However, she was surprised to find a wooden box on the seat next to her that wasn't there before. Despite her unease, she brushed it off and continued the ride. The couple claimed they wanted to visit an ice cave nearby and asked Colleen to accompany them. When they arrived at the destination, Cameron attacked Colleen with a knife, blindfolded her, and put her head inside the box. What Colleen didn't know was that the box was actually a torture device. It was soundproofed with carpet, weighed nearly 9 kilograms, and only allowed a small amount of air in. Colleen was trapped inside and forced to comply with Cameron's demands. Cameron forced Colleen to remain in the car until they reached home and then took her to the basement. Many of us have heard of basements being used for sinister purposes, and Colleen found herself in one filled with torture devices. At first, she didn't understand the purpose of the wooden and metal tools, but it quickly became clear that she was in the hands of a madman. Cameron, who was perceived as a loving father who worked hard to support his family, was actually a twisted individual who had an obsession with enslaving and torturing women. He had even collected magazines that catered to individuals with psychopathic tendencies. Cameron saw Janice as a vulnerable and weak target when he first met her and took advantage of that by promising to love and care for her forever, with the condition that she participate in his hobbies, which were actually his twisted and sadistic acts. Despite being tortured on their first date, Janice stayed with him because he treated her well after that. However, after a year of marriage, Janice grew tired of Cameron's violent and sadistic nature and told him she wanted children and for him to stop torturing her. Cameron agreed on the condition that they find another victim for him to carry out his sadistic acts on, referring to the victim as a slave. Janice agreed, but only on the condition that Cameron not rape her, though she was willing to have other women subjected to the same horrific experiences. Both Cameron and Janice's actions are reprehensible. Cameron spent much of his time in the basement creating torture devices and devising new forms of torment. He constructed a table of pain and a massive wooden coffin and readied the basement for his next target. He became so consumed by his insanity that he tested these devices on Janice, even while she was pregnant, to make sure they worked properly. It took him many months to get the basement ready. After the birth of their first daughter, who was doomed to live with these two sociopaths, they went in search of their next target. Unfortunately, Colleen crossed their path and became their prey. Once Colleen entered the basement, her torment began when Cameron suspended her from her wrists. At the start, Colleen fought back, screamed, and tried to break free, but Cameron began to torture her to make her stop. He threatened to cut her vocal cords if she didn't stop screaming, warning her she'd be left to scream without a voice, claiming he had done it before. That person is a monster, and it's outrageous. I've read the story and I'm so angry. I'm sure you feel the same or even more. Cameron returned with a heavy box and placed Colleen's head inside, locking it. But that wasn't enough for him. He then got a larger box, a coffin, and confined Colleen inside, locking it again. Colleen had to endure the confined space in the coffin until the next day, with limited air and unbearable heat. Why did Cameron put Colleen in a box within a box? The kidnapping was primarily for the purpose of torture, and simple confinement in the basement wouldn't suffice. I can only pray for patience as I continue with this story. Unfortunately, Colleen was forced to live in the coffin and was subjected to Cameron's sadistic torment every day upon his return from work. I won't describe the details, but the acts of torture were unspeakably brutal. Colleen was confined to the box for nearly a full day, only getting out for an hour or two. She had a plastic container as a bathroom. Cameron only released her to eat scraps of their food or to torture her. He was skilled in manual labor, and he created a medieval-style torture device in which the victim's hands and legs were tied to 4 corners and then stretched. Cameron, being creative, added a twist by wrapping Colleen's body in electrical wires and shocked her while stretching her. I'm struggling to contain my anger and refrain from saying crude things. After a month of daily torture, Colleen had lost 10 kilograms. She was blindfolded throughout the torture, leaving her in complete darkness and unsure of what would happen next, whether she would be hit, strangled, or shocked. After 4 months of this horrific routine, Cameron allowed her to take a shower. Colleen constantly questioned what she had done to deserve such cruel torture, but she failed to realize that when a psychopath tortures someone, they don't care if they know the victim or not. Their sole goal is to exploit and fulfill their twisted desires. The torment continued for another 4 months, bringing the total to 8 months of imprisonment. Cameron then allowed Colleen out of the box for more than just a couple of hours, but only to clean and perform household chores inside the house. He had to remove her blindfold so she could see during that brief time. However, her senses were still impaired from being blindfolded for 8 months and being immobile inside the box, leading to physical and psychological distress. In January 1978, Cameron revealed to Colleen that he was a member of a secret organization called The Company, consisting of wealthy and high-ranking individuals like judges and police officers who secretly enslave women through contracts in the USA. The company also utilized advanced monitoring technology to track the women in case they attempted to escape or contact the police. If they did, they would not receive help from the police, as they were part of the organization, and the women and their families would be killed. The reason for the company's secrecy was that it would kill anyone who tried to expose them. One day, Cameron presented Colleen with a slavery contract and ordered her to sign it, making her officially his slave under the name Janice acted as a witness. From that day on, Cameron began raping Colleen, and things only got worse. Over time, Colleen accepted her fate as a slave, but was afraid to escape due to the company's surveillance and her concern for her loved ones. Eventually, Cameron decided to move them all into a caravan, but the living conditions worsened as the cramped space made it difficult for 3 people and a baby. Cameron even forced Colleen back into the box under the bed, where he continued to torment her. To make matters even worse, Janice gave birth to their second baby on the bed Colleen was trapped beneath. Over the years, Colleen's family searched for her, but they eventually gave up hope and believed she had been killed or joined a cult. They were unaware of the horrific reality she was living in. 3 years went by, and Colleen became more docile, accepting her enslavement. Cameron even allowed her to leave the box and made her follow orders when he commanded attention. He had her work in the yard, and the neighbors saw her and thought she was part of the family. Cameron was convinced he had complete control over Colleen, who he believed would never tell anyone due to the company's threat of violence. He was a complete monster, whose ego and arrogance had grown to dangerous levels. One day, he allowed her to walk around the block alone, confident she wouldn't run away. And she didn't. Cameron saw her as a broken and obedient dog, even if he took her to her parents' house. One day, Cameron granted Colleen the gift of being able to call her parents. Unbelievably, Colleen was overjoyed and appreciative. She phoned her sister, who was stunned to hear from her, and immediately asked how she was doing and where she had been. Colleen merely replied that she was fine and didn't say anything about Cameron. Her family then assumed she had joined a cult and didn't press for further information. They told her to stay in touch and acknowledge they were her family, but also expressed their disappointment in her sudden disappearance and lack of communication. Despite their accusations, the truth was that Colleen couldn't reveal anything about her situation. Cameron was extremely proud of his control over Colleen and treated her like his own personal slave. At first, he had to keep her locked up to prevent her escape, but then he allowed her to walk around the block and even talk to her parents, while still maintaining control over her. What a scumbag. He even gave her 2 gifts, the first being the ability to call her parents, and the second, even more astonishing, was to let her visit her family in person. Despite being fully aware of the company's surveillance, Colleen only pretended everything was fine, hiding the truth from her family. When she visited them, accompanied by Cameron, introduced as her fiancé Mike, her skinny, scrawny appearance and exhaustion raised questions about her well-being. Despite her family's concerns, Colleen refused to answer their questions and kept up the act of being okay. Colleen's family chose not to question her, allowing her to continue visiting. Cameron returned the next day to retrieve her. The photo depicting the 2 of them as a happy couple was taken by Colleen's parents. Knowing the truth about Colleen's situation makes the image both heartbreaking and anger-inducing. Despite being with her family, Colleen remained silent and did not take any action. She had accepted her life as a captive and could only speak when instructed by Cameron. Colleen's main concern was the contract she signed, fearing harm to her loved ones. After the visit, Cameron felt he may have been too lenient and returned to confining Colleen in a box for up to 23 hours a day and intensifying the torture. That situation lasted for 3 years until 1983, when Cameron allowed Colleen to leave once again. Despite being under his complete control, he had ruined Colleen's life. He allowed her to care for the children, but as a reminder of her status as his slave. When Colleen saw that the children had grown up, she was shocked to realize how much time had passed. She wondered how long she had been imprisoned and what impact it had on the 2 young girls in that caravan. They may have seen or heard things that would stay with them forever. 7 years later, Cameron forced Colleen to work as a hotel cleaner and start earning money for him. He had grown tired of just torturing her and wanted to make a profit from her enslavement. He forced Colleen to work and earn money for him instead of letting her stay for free. What a terrible life she was living in that caravan. For the love of God, set her free, divorce her, or just let her go and live a normal life. May God curse you. That's all we can say. You know what happened next. Colleen worked as a cleaning lady in a hotel. At least she was around people, which was better than being subjected to torture in a caravan. People started noticing her appearance and asking why she was so worn out and skinny. However, as usual, Colleen remained silent. She was resigned to her fate as a slave and couldn't speak out, as she feared that the company would kill her, her family, and friends. Personally, I think living like that is unacceptable. I would have contacted the authorities, regardless of the consequences, because the story about the evil company was so implausible that they would harm her and her loved ones. I would have called for help, even if it meant putting myself in danger. Colleen was already like a dead person, but at least the dead are at peace. This poor woman was far from it, and her life was not one of a human being at all. She agreed to the life of slavery out of fear for the safety of her family and friends. However, Cameron's desire for control only grew stronger with time, and he sought to enslave more women. Bored with Colleen alone, he started constructing a torture chamber in his backyard and made Colleen assist him. He informed her of his plan to train other women to be obedient and submissive to him, like she was. During this period, Cameron attempted to get closer to Colleen and showed her a slight shift in treatment, treating her with reduced cruelty due to her promotion from being just a slave to a trainer. The man allowed Colleen to spend more time with his children to try and get close to them and play with them, and he even told her that he would consider her his second wife as another promotion. This situation is extremely frustrating and makes the speaker feel very angry. Janice became increasingly jealous of Colleen and hated having her around. It wasn't until years later, when Janice began attending church and sermons, that she became aware of her conscience and felt guilty for not helping Colleen. Although Janice was also a victim, she was still seen as a participant in the crime because she had the opportunity to save Colleen from the start, but instead chose not to act. The speaker is upset and wants to use harsher language, but refrains from doing so. Janice took some time to consider before she decided to approach Colleen and aid in her escape. It's unclear, as the story does not mention it, but it's speculated that Janice only helped Colleen escape because she felt jealous of Cameron's plans to marry her. Despite Colleen being imprisoned, tortured, and humiliated for 7 years, Janice did nothing to help. However, when Cameron decided to marry Colleen, Janice's conscience suddenly awakened, and she decided to assist in her escape. It's frustrating that it took Janice 7 years to feel guilty and help Colleen. On August 9th, 1984, Janice visited Colleen at the hotel and told her there was something important she needed to know. She informed Colleen that the company wouldn't kill her if she tried to escape, as it did not actually exist. Colleen was unable to think rationally due to the torture and cruelty she faced, so it is understandable that she blindly believed this. Janice revealed to Colleen that the idea of a company controlling the police and judges was false, and that reporting them would not lead to harm to her friends and family. Given the traumatic experience Colleen had endured, being locked up in a coffin with a wooden box over her head for years, it's understandable that she would feel disorientated and confused. Janice explained that the contract Colleen signed was a fabrication created by Cameron to keep her from leaving, and not a legitimate document. Colleen was overwhelmed with emotion upon realizing that she had been living under a false premise for years and could have escaped at any time. She broke down in tears. The woman had been misled to believe in the existence of the company. Despite having chances to escape, she stayed put, thinking she was a slave. However, it was all revealed to be a deception. Colleen then quickly left to the bus station, called her father to inform him she was coming home, and also called Cameron to tell him she had escaped and would never return. Despite Cameron's pleas and tears, Colleen hung up, boarded the bus, and reunited with her family. Her relieved family welcomed her back, but she remained in shock and did not reveal the details of her ordeal. Janice called Colleen the next morning and asked her not to report Cameron to the police. Instead, she promised to work with Colleen to help Cameron change for the better. Janice believed that the only way to reform Cameron was not through a traditional execution, but through torture that mirrored what he had done to Colleen. In these types of cases, merely executing the criminal or giving them a life sentence in prison is not enough. Janice suggested that Cameron should be subjected to the same treatment he had inflicted on Colleen, such as being placed in a coffin with a box over his head for 22 to 23 hours a day and being fed only leftovers, or perhaps not feeding him at all, letting him die a slow and painful death. To Janice's surprise, Colleen agreed to work with her to try and change Cameron. For 3 months, Colleen remained silent about her ordeal and kept her family in the dark to avoid involving the police. During this time, Janice focused on attending church sermons and eventually confided in the priest about the events that had transpired with Colleen. The priest was shocked to hear Janice's story and urged her to go to the police and offered to accompany her. While Colleen was not the one to inform the authorities, Janice took the step to do so. Despite Colleen's actions that frustrated the author at times, it is acknowledged that she may have been struggling with mental distress as a result of her traumatic experience. However, the surprise was on Janice, as the police did not believe her story. The police initially dismissed Janice's story, thinking it was too far-fetched to be true. However, when they searched the caravan and the old house, they found evidence that supported her claims, including torture devices, a fake contract forged by Cameron, and disturbing photos taken during Colleen's captivity. Colleen was called to testify in court, but her demeanor was puzzling to everyone. Despite what she had suffered, she appeared calm and detached, simply recounting the events without any sign of anger or desire for revenge. The court wanted to determine if Colleen had been coerced or had consented to the treatment, as the latter would have significant implications for Cameron's guilt. At the trial, Colleen spoke about her experience, including some happy moments she had during her captivity. Some believe that Colleen was suffering from Stockholm Syndrome, a condition in which hostages form an emotional attachment to their captors. Colleen stated that what had affected her the most was not the physical torture, but the belief that the company existed and she was a slave for all those years. Janice also made a crucial statement during the trial, disclosing that Colleen was not the first victim of Cameron's crimes. She revealed that in 1976, a year before kidnapping Colleen, Cameron had kidnapped, raped, tortured, and murdered a 20-year-old girl named Mary Elizabeth. Janice claimed to have witnessed the murder and burial in the desert, but the police were unable to find any evidence. As for Janice's situation, the court granted her full immunity in exchange for her testimony against Cameron. They recognized her as a victim as well, who had been brainwashed and subjected to torture like Colleen. While some thought Janice should have faced consequences for being considered a co-conspirator in the crime, I also hold this belief. Colleen was tricked into riding with them because she saw Janice with her baby and believed they were a normal family. Janice's presence in the car made Colleen trust Cameron and feel safe, thus making her a participant in the crime. However, the judge acquitted Janice without punishment. Cameron's defense argued that Colleen stayed with him willingly because she didn't try to escape when she had the opportunity, implying she wanted to be with him. But the jury saw this as nonsense, given the evidence of the torture Colleen faced, including the box displayed during the trial. Ultimately, Cameron was sentenced to 104 years in prison. Cameron's post-sentencing comment to his lawyer: "I want you to thank the judge for me. I have a library, a gym, and the time to enjoy them. And it's better than living with those two women," referring to Colleen and Janice, showed a lack of remorse. In 2021, due to the pandemic, several prisoners were considered for release, including Cameron, but Colleen quickly took action and hired a lawyer to stop it. Despite this, he still has a chance of being released in 2022, pending a test to determine if he has lost his sadistic tendencies. Janice, on the other hand, changed her identity and moved out of the state, her whereabouts unknown. The story inspired the film Girl in the Box, which was criticized for not accurately portraying Colleen's true suffering and for making Cameron seem nicer. The real story is far from the film, and Colleen, now in her 60s, has bravely shared her experience in several interviews. Colleen credits her faith in God for helping her through the difficult times. She kept herself motivated by imagining spending holidays and special moments with her family, even while in captivity. Eventually, Colleen was able to pick up the pieces of her life. She resumed her studies, got married, had children, and became involved in an organization that helps women who have suffered from violence. Although the memories still haunt her and bring her to tears, she is grateful for a positive outcome where she was not killed and her attacker was brought to justice. Her story is considered one of the most brutal in American history. Colleen credits her faith in God for helping her through the difficult times. She kept herself motivated by imagining spending holidays and special moments with her family, even while in captivity. Eventually, Colleen was able to pick up the pieces of her life. She resumed her studies, got married, had children, and became involved in an organization that helps women who have suffered from violence. Although the memories still haunt her and bring her to tears, she is grateful for a positive outcome where she was not killed and her attacker was brought to justice. Her story is considered one of the most brutal in American history. As the video concludes, there is a question raised about Janice's role in the story. While Cameron's actions are clearly criminal and Colleen is a victim, Janice's position is less clear. The video's creator invites the audience to share their opinions on whether they see Janice as a victim or a criminal. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and share it to support the creator. There's more to come.